what kind of helicopter they put this in, they can wire it so one, the buttons can be used for different purposes in whatever they want to use it for. Let's see, that's the rocket management system, just general instruments for flying. We're at 2,300 feet here. I'm not exactly sure where that's taken. That was a pilot seat, the gunner seat. Back in those days, the gunner had a trapezoidal type of mount. He could release it from here, and there's a release up here. So it's sitting on the side. He takes off all the releases. He can pick it up, move the sight, okay, whichever way. And he looks at this through the sight there. The buttons are the 40 millimeter gun. There's two, and then the front side is the trigger, two-position trigger for the minigun. First position, 2,000 rounds a minute. Second position, fully in, 4,000 rounds a minute. This is the cyclic for the back seat, just a short stick. It's harder to fly from the front seat. This has a two-position. This is a guarded trigger for the guns. It's two-position, okay. And this is the collective. The collective is the power lever in a helicopter. When you pull up, you increase power. The rotors maintain the same RPM, it's just that they increase their pitch and you pick up to a hover. Okay, general view on that. Okay, so I was with an air cavalry operation. What is cavalry? What does cavalry do? A lot of it is reconnaissance. So our mission in Vietnam was to locate and identify the enemy, pick out where he was strong and where he was weak, not necessarily to engage. That's for different units to make the main engagement, but sometimes we did as well. So we had 7 Cobras, 7 OH-6 Loach helicopters like this, and we had 7 Hueys. So what happens is we all go out as a team. There's normally 2 or 3 Cobras, 2 or 3 OH-6s, and 2 Hueys taking the aerial rifle platoon. So it's grunts who are sitting in helicopters. They might be used for a search on the ground if we find something of interest, or they might not be used. And then another helicopter would fly overhead as commanding control. He was the guy in charge of everything. He said, let's go over here, look for the enemy there. And when we find the enemy, which is usually what these guys do, they get found by the enemy because they fly low and slow over the jungle, treetop level, about 20 miles an hour, and they are looking for where there might be bunkers or people or any sign of enemy activity. The area we flew was in the central part of Vietnam, and we flew mostly along the Cambodian and Laotian border, looking for infiltration routes along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The whole place was a free fire zone. All of the local people had been repositioned to hamlets or villages further on where they could be protected and controlled. So if we saw anybody out there, we could shoot them. We normally didn't unless there was a good reason to, but often since we had our aerial rifle platoon and we saw one guy running around in the woods and he didn't seem like a threat, well, we'd land near there. The troops off of the 2 Hueys would go grab him and we'd take him back to camp for interrogation. But other than that, normally the scouts are on the ground. The Cobras are overhead about 1,500 feet above them. If the scouts see something, they have a pilot and they have an observer. The observer has a smoke grenade. He's already pulled the pin out and he lays it under his foot so that so it won't start. If he sees something, immediately kicks the smoke grenade out, and that tells us where these people are on the ground. Or if he's shot down, we can kind of tell where they're at also. I do not envy 6 pilots, OH-6 pilots. I do not know one who is not shot down, okay? Don't have a picture of a Huey, but most of you probably know what a Huey looks like. Okay, so let's see where this goes. Okay, it's time to go someplace. We're getting in our helicopter. usually 6 or 7 or 8 of them, and we all go out in mass. And we're going to go out and wait for a definite assignment. We're going to go to a holding area, usually a Montagnard village which has been evacuated, and we're going to hold here. And while we're holding, sometimes you can explore the Montagnard villages. The Montagnards are the Aboriginal people. They're treated poorly by normal Vietnamese people, kind of like we treated the Indians and the Australians treat their Aborigines. Universal all over the world. So these guys are walking around a Montagnard village. The longhouse is where all the people slept. There it is. The little huts are where they kept our animals at night. So we're probably about 5 miles from the Cambodian border here. And we're sitting over there just taking it easy until we get a definite assignment. Meanwhile, other people are coming through. Okay, it's time to go someplace. Crank up. We're heading off to where we need to go. Again, we're in the Central Highlands. And the main mountain ridge of Southeast Asia runs through where the borders are between Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia. So we're getting up to higher altitudes. View the scenery, getting up to about 5,000 feet. High for there, but not so high here. Okay. Well, this guy that's an OH-6 right there. He's looking around here. He may have found something. So if he found something, I need to get my stuff in gear, okay? So I'm looking forward to the gunner. He's awake. Normally, when the 6s are out looking on, finding stuff on the ground, the Cobras are overhead circling, and they're like at 60 to 100 knots. So it's really slow. We're conserving fuel, and believe it or not, it's really boring doing that. And sometimes we go to sleep. We don't go to sleep, both of us, at the same time. We just want to keep it cool there. But anyhow, the 6 finds something, so it's time for us to get in gear. I'm checking him. He's awake. I have rockets. Okay, that's good. I can only see the outboard pod. I cannot see the inboard pod from the pilot seat. Check my ammunition or my weapons bay. Okay. That blue light means the 40 millimeter is ready to go. The 7.62 millimeter minigun's ready to go. And I've selected one rocket from each pod if I start shooting. So normally we only shoot, and I've selected it looks like the inboard pod here. Normally we go outboard first. But normally when we shoot 2 rockets, even though we're carrying 52 rockets. We just shoot 2 rockets at a time. That way, if we miss a little bit on the first time, we can kind of re-aim the helicopter and shoot some more until we think we've hit something. And let's see, what else does this say? Well, anyhow. Okay, my head-up display is on. I'm ready to rock and roll. Okay. The 6s are on the ground, or close to the ground. They're looking for trouble. They'll probably find it. And there's another one way down there. They're hard to see. They're hard to see. They have a white stripe on the back. Our tail has a little bit of red on the elevators. What's red and white? Pink. We're known as a pink team. Okay. Okay. The other Cobra, so we're in a big circle waiting to go in if we find something. This guy's going to take a lower look before we start shooting. Okay, here, he's actually on a rocket run, and that's a previous explosion from a rocket. He's in about a 30 or 40 degree dive. This isn't too heavily wooded here, but sometimes when you have a triple canopy jungle, you want to get the rocket to, since most of them are point detonating fuses, you want to get as least amount of wood between the sky and the ground, so you would go pretty vertical sometimes.
Are you in direct communications with the ground forces?
No, we have no ground forces down there at the time. It's all enemy territory. If we decide to land the Hueys later to go through, and then we'll talk to them at that point. But right now, during rocket fire, we don't have any friendlies on the ground. All right, there's an explosion out there, way in the distance. Yeah, we're out of rockets. Gosh. You know what that means? It means we have to go back to Camp Anari and reload. Okay, so we're back. We're back at Camp Anari. We've gotten fuel. We go over to the rearmament point. You'll notice nobody's in the helicopter while the thing is still running. We've got pilots and ground crew all collectively trying to help the armament people reload the ammo bays and also the rockets. Pilots are trained about how to operate and maintain the minigun and a 40 millimeter. The problem is, unless you do everything exactly correctly and you're practiced at it, we just let the armament guys do it. Otherwise, we'd screw it up. And it wouldn't shoot, in other words. Okay, so we went out and did the same thing again as the first routine. We're done for the day. We're going to land here back at Hensel Army Airfield, landing to the west. Okay. A final refueling for the day. And if the ARP or the aerial rifle platoon guys got on the ground, and sometimes they find stuff like this, and time for a photo shot like that. Okay, the working day is over. Sometimes, so that is a typical working day. Once in a while we get into the city of Pleiku, see what's going on there. Check out the black market here. All U.S. stuff here is being sold to the Vietnamese. And that's just an airplane that's at Camp Anari. Okay, so that is all you get for slides on my tour of Vietnam. I do have movies later, but I need to switch over to where it says BHI in Iran. Okay, so anyhow, I got okay, close that. I think that's, no, not that, that's movies, that's later. I have strict instructions as to how to do this. Okay, okay, Iran. Well, let me just follow up before I get started here. After the active army, I then joined the National Guard out at Buckley. I was in the National Guard for 16 years, and I retired as the senior helicopter instructor pilot with the Army Guard. So, but you're not going to hear about that anymore. Okay. Okay, in 1975, I was reading the Denver Post when they still had advertisements, and it says, Bell Helicopter is looking for instructor pilots for Iran. And I said, well, you know, I'm not doing anything. I think I'll do that. So I sent them a resume, and the next day there was a ticket waiting for me at then Stapleton Airport. Flew down to Dallas, got hired, went through their training program, and then after about a month or so, in January of 1976, I arrived in Isfahan, Iran. Isfahan is the second largest city in Iran. It's where Bell Helicopter had set up a training school for the Iranian military. It's patterned after the U.S. Army training school. And Bell sold them a whole bunch of helicopters. It was run by the Navy. The U.S. Navy sort of overlooked it. And the reason they did that is because also in Isfahan, there was a Grumman F-14 Tomcat program. Iran is the only country we ever sold F-14s to. So there was a F-14 Tomcat program on the north side at an air base there, And we were on a south side at an Army base doing our training. I was there for 3 years. Okay, well, that's the Cruise Hotel. We'd go there, we'd stay there for a month while we got a place to rent or to room with somebody or whatever we were gonna do. Most people who were married did take their whole families over there. So it worked out to be a good deal for many people. Okay, at the top of the hotel, when you look out, you see some of the sites in Isfahan. 500 years ago, Isfahan was the capital of Persia. In 1935, Persia officially changed its name to Iran. Okay, so there's a lot of history in this place. Mosque like that. There's what they call this Pol COSA, which is a 33-arch bridge, which goes over the Zayanda Road or the Zayanda River. Starts in the mountains, up in the Zagros Mountains, comes down, goes through Isfahan. 100 miles later, it goes into a big puddle and dries up out there. Okay, is that what I want to talk? That'll work. I did finally get an apartment, and looking to the southwest, you see this mountain range. And at nighttime, whoops, anyhow, that's how it looks southwest from the hotel. I did buy a vehicle, and that is it. It's a Iranian-built French Citroen pickup truck. Citroen, they call it a Geon. Geon is the Farsi name or the Persian name for the lion's roar, okay? So that's a Geon. A lot of guys had these things. Basically everybody did buy a vehicle. Okay, so welcome to Isfahan. Population then, it's doubled now. Altitude, that works out to about 5,200 feet. It's a lot like Denver or Salt Lake City. And gives you the area. So I'm looking north.
So a very dry kind of climate.
Oh yeah. It's a little drier than Denver, maybe not quite as dry as Salt Lake. Well, all of Iran is dry, unless you're up by the Caspian Sea. Okay, looking way north, with a telephoto lens, way past the city, that is Hueys or North Mountain. I've climbed to the top of that thing. One of my days off. Okay. The oldest bridge in town is 900 years old. They try to not use it. Okay, the Shah Abbas Hotel, it used to be what's called a caravansary. Back in the olden days when they had the Silk Route, you'd go so many miles and the caravan would stay in a little fort type thing. You go another 10 miles, stay in another fort. So this is a converted caravansary. Got to get used to this thing. Okay. Most of the foreigners, well, a lot of foreigners like myself, I lived on the economy, okay? I bought locally, but sometimes I go to a restaurant or to a, quote, Western type of supermarket. This is called the Pole Super or the Bridge Supermarket on the main street. Here they're breaking in a new Persian carpet. A new Persian carpet, when it's first made, all of the strands coming out of the top are about 3 or 4 inches long, and then it has to be cut, and that's a delicate operation all by itself, but it's still very stiff. A real Persian carpet is very stiff, and actually this helps them loosen up a little bit. I don't know how long they keep it there, though. I mean, it's dirty, but then they clean it, Okay, this is the view from my apartment. These are similar apartments to these. The finish isn't all that good. They're all mud brick and stacked upon each other, and this is what I was thinking I was going to talk about later. But anyhow, I'm looking to the southwest at this mountain. in the daytime. This guy has a Geon, the sedan version. There's 3 versions. The truck version, which I had the sedan version, and the Jeep version. And you'll see one of those after it was burned later on. At night, you see, this is a reminder of who's in control. It's the crown. The Shah of Iran is in control. So, and these are just a night view of what we saw before. There you go. Okay, the first guy I roomed with when I was going through my indoctrination was a guy named Gale Stouse. And he was the high-time pilot for Bell. And while I was in training, he took me along on a flight up to Tehran with him. And that was kind of interesting. Now, one thing about Gale, he has a interesting, I don't know if you recognize him there, but that's 1946. He went through Navy flight training in 1946 in Hellcats, F-6F Hellcats. Immediately afterwards, he was one of the first 5 members of the Blue Angels. He was the very first Blue Angels team, flying F-6F Hellcats, and then shortly later, they got into Bearcats. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Okay, anyhow, on the way up to Tehran, just typical mountain views. That's the other helicopter that was with us. This is a Bell 214A, which Bell built for Iran. It has a single Chinook engine, 2,900 horsepower, derated to 2,200, large blades, and so they got about 200 of these. And while we were there were plans to make a twin engine version in a plant that the Iranians were going to build, but that never occurred. Okay, one of the main sites in Tehran, a monument that the Shah built to commemorate himself. This is Mehrabad Airport, the main international airport. The military side here, the civil side here. Whenever I went to and from Iran, I'd go through Tehran, Mehrabad, then get an Iran air flight down to Isfahan. So this is the only airport of entry at the time at Tehran. Okay, back in Isfahan, some more scenic things here. These are the things that our president really recently said he was going to bomb if Iran did anything wrong at all, until he was reminded that that's illegal to do that. That's what that looks like at night. So I'm glad he didn't bomb them. Most of my slides are actually of this kind of stuff, and of helicopters is really kind of the major role here. Looking from one minaret to another, and off to the side, more of that. Persepolis, I don't know if you've ever heard of Persepolis. In 300 BC or something, Alexander the Great came through and kind of wrecked the place. But it used to be the ceremonial capital of what was then the ancient capital. Okay, so that's the Zoroastrian god. Okay, and then okay, back to what am I doing here anyway? Well, this is where I worked. A very large heliport south of the city. It took me about 15 minutes from where I lived to get here. Okay, these are the primary trainers, the Augusta Bell 206. It's just like our US Bell 206, but the Iranian or the Italians built it. Augusta built it. The Hueys, they had a whole bunch of standard U.S. Army Hueys, which I don't know how I guess we sold them to them. This happens to be an Italian-built Huey. So the first year I was here, I trained people in the Huey. The second year I was here, I trained people in basic training in the Augusta Bell 206. Okay, so there I am with my very first students. And this is the only picture of me anywhere near a helicopter in Iran, because I was not allowed to have a camera. anywhere near a military base. Those who had been caught are immediately put on a plane and sent home, okay? Rather than being arrested and who knows what, they were just sent home.
Did the student pilots speak English?
Yes, they did. Actually quite well. When the program first started in the early 70s, they got 6 weeks of English training. By the time I got there, they were getting 26 weeks of English training before they went to flight school. But they did very well, I thought.
That camera policy, did that come from the government or from our government?
Their government.
Okay.
I mean, we know all about the helicopters. You know, we've made them, so.
I mean, okay, sites
Yeah.
are on there.
Yeah, they just don't want, you know, the base to be photographed or whatever reason they have. Most countries are that way, actually, especially in the Middle East. Okay, for some reason, he got his friend to take a picture of me. And ironically, he was my very first student. And he asked me, "Mr. Robbins, how long have you been here, sir?" I said, "Well, you are my first student." That was really impressive. But anyhow, we got to be good friends, and I had many students after that. I have no idea whatever happened to them. But anyhow, I got along with them great. It was great. It was a great life over there, actually. Once a person goes through basic in the 206s and the advanced in the Hueys, then they get selected to either go to the 214 training, which is what these things are, or Cobras. Like these. These are Iranian AH-1J Cobras. Now the US Marines had AH-1J Cobras, but these had a more powerful engine because they started a mile high and go up, whereas the Marines normally stay down at sea level. So at the time, these were the hottest Cobras being made for anybody.
Do they have air conditioning, John?
Yes, they do. Originally, Cobras did not have air conditioning, but they had a blue tinted canopy. But that wasn't enough. Eventually, they had an environmental control system in all Cobras. And it was so good that if you were in a humid area, the little air conditioning vents would come out and it'd start pitching snowballs at you. It was a good system, you know, it really was. But it used bleed air from the engines as power to do that. It was okay. It didn't really affect it that much. This is a tow Cobra. They got 202 Cobras. The last 64 were tow missile capable. You can tell that by the little bucket on the front for the tow missile sight. That's the gunner uses a sight there. This has a tow missile launcher on the side. So this and a bigger engine, it was probably the most advanced Cobra at the time. Eventually the Marines they went to the T model Cobra, which had the same engines as this, and then they got the tow missile system on the T model. So we had more power per weight than any other aircraft. So they got 64 of these.
Were the Iranian pilots dual qualified gunner and pilot?
Yeah, they fly both seats. Most of the time they get in the back seat. That's where everything is. Once they went through Cobra transition, then they would get a separate tow missile qualification. Okay, so they could all fly everything. You've probably heard of Lieutenant Colonel Ollie North and the Iran-Contra affair. Well, what the Iranians got were tow missiles that fit, go back here, that fit right in there. There's no missile, it's just the launcher that's on here now. This is one launcher. One launcher will carry 2 missiles, and if you have another one on here, it's mounted directly below. So it can carry a total of 8 missiles. Normally at this altitude, they just had 1 launcher, so you'd have 2 on each side or 4.
Did the tow missile require a little wire that?
Yes.
Went out with it?
Okay.
How do you do that while you're flying?
Well, here's how. One guy in the back, he does the flying. The other guy in the front, he does the tow missile. Okay. So, tow missile, tube launch, optically track, wire guided. I should have put in a diagram. But anyhow, when the thing shoots and it comes out, it's launched from a tube. The crew never actually see the missile. It's got a cover on the front and a cover on the back. You hit the trigger on it, it goes out. So that's a tube launched, optically tracked. At the back of the missile, there's a flare, infrared flare, which is picked up by this sight. And all the gunner has to do is with his 13 power sight, is put it on the target and keep it there. It's gyro stabilized. You know, sometimes he has a separate little stick for that. He bumps it a little bit, make sure it stays on the target. If it's on the target, the missile will correct itself to the line of sight of the sight. Okay, and then hopefully it'll hit the target. But the max range is 3,750 meters, or about 2 miles. And I can tell you, at the end of 2 miles, even with a 13 power sight, that a tank would be pretty small. I did shoot one once when I was in the Guard, and I didn't even know if, I really couldn't tell if I was on the target or not until it hit. But anyhow, what was I going to say? So there's 2 little wires that come out of the aft end of the missile as it continues down its merry path to the tank. And the wires are what makes corrections to the missile to get back onto the line of sight. Okay, so all the gunner has to do is put the sight on the target, shoot the missile, and unfortunately, 21 seconds later, it finally gets there. And 21 seconds is a long time when you're waiting for your missile to hit a tank and it sees you and his barrel starts coming around like that. There you because his time of flight is about a second. So that's the drawback of this, is that you have to maintain the target in sight during the whole operation. And it takes 21 seconds for the missile. It takes 23 seconds if you pull the trigger on the first one and keep the trigger down and don't release it, it'll automatically shoot a second one.
Chuck, what's the coordination between the 2 guys? I mean,
Well, the guy in the back, I don't know he has an instrument in the back, and he has to get within what's called pre-launch constraints, so that when the missile does fire, it's close enough to the alignment that it will actually track. If the helicopter is pointed there and the target's there, it'll never get onto the target, you see. So there's a little instrument which tells the pilot where he has to be in azimuth, relatively speaking, and in elevation, relatively speaking, so that he then tells the target, you're ready to shoot, basically. And then now the gunner doesn't know if he's in pre-launch constraints or not. The pilot does, okay? What's going on here? So anyhow, when he shoots, then there's post-launch constraints. Once he does shoot, the post-launch constraints are a lot wider. The pilot can turn 90 degrees either way, but the missile has already been captured by the system and is directed down to the target. Now, but anyhow, that was the whole thing about a TOW missile, and that is what Ollie North sold to the Iranians, TOW missiles, which they needed because they were having the Iran-Iraq war at the time. At the time, I was really upset with what was going on there, but I'm not so mad at them now. That is the Iranians. Okay, the view from the pilot seat. Now, the only time I took pictures is when I was in the back seat, because I wouldn't want the student there in the front seat to know I had a camera. So, okay, this is just some of that. Basic qualification, and then what they call tactical flying. Here's the one at low altitude, we're at high altitude, and we train the people what to do in case they're being attacked by a fighter or something, how to evade that. This is over a place called Borjan, Iran, which is southwest, and we're going up into the mountains here. Notice the camouflage works pretty well. There it is. It blends in real well with the scenery. Okay, sometimes we have cross-country flights out east. This is the Zayanda River, or the Zayanda River, I should say, an old fortified town going to the east. Different view, way out into the middle of real desert, which is one of my favorite shots. I shot from the aft seat. This guy in a white flight suit here, at the time we had white flight suits, and so that's the instructor. This is the student in the back. On my aircraft, I was in the back. This is near a town called Najafabad. We have gunnery training here. So here they learn to shoot rockets in the 20 millimeter cannon. The 20 millimeter is a lot more reliable than the minigun. It holds 750 rounds in the ammo bay, and it shoots 750 rounds per minute. So it has about a minute of firing. But having shot both, miniguns jammed quite a bit, and these things, I've never had a jam on a 20 millimeter. It's the same M61 Vulcan cannon that the US has used in its fighters, but with a slower motor and with 3 blades instead of 6. Okay, that talks about my flying. End times. Everything was cool for the first 2.5 years of my 3 years there. The last 6 months is when things started getting tense. There's a celebration called Ashura, and being Shiite Muslims, they celebrate the death of Ali, which is supposedly the follow-on to Muhammad after he died. So that's what differentiates them from the Sunni religion, which do not recognize the authority of Ali. So anyhow, they're celebrating his death here, and it's a real, and we were told not to get near any processions or anybody else during this time of year. Okay, here's a demonstration. So this is where the anti-Shah demonstration started. And you know, we drive around town for a while, and we didn't know if they were a pro-Shah or an anti-Shah. So we have little flip charts of photographs. Some would be of the Shah and his family, and some would be of Ayatollah Khomeini and his followers. We never knew until we somehow got surrounded. So you keep flipping until they smile. If you didn't have the right pictures, they'd bash your windshield in for you. Okay. No Bell employees were killed or hurt at any time, to my knowledge. There was one U.S. Army colonel in Tehran, I believe, who was assassinated, but he was the only death that I'm aware of. Okay, continue on. Yankee go home. Okay, so Yankee get out of Iran. And sometimes you see death to Carter, death to the Carter. This was the Jeep version of the Geon, pretty open there. A lot of guys had these, but this one's been burned out. They did burn out a lot of our vehicles. Luckily mine wasn't one of them, but anyhow, I knew the guy who owned this thing. But Bell then got into a program reimbursing the pilots or whoever, or the mechanics or whoever owned these things if they worked for Bell. But then when that got around, people started burning their own vehicles. So that program didn't last very long. Okay, I believe these are Iranian military here. They bought a lot of Soviet equipment. Armored, there's a BTR-60, and those are Russian-designed Jeeps. Didn't want to get near those guys. Okay, finally we went back to the Carouge Hotel when it was time to leave. The same hotel I stayed in for a month as I was getting organized. So the demonstrations are getting hot and heavy at this point. So all these ladies have what in Saudi Arabia they call it burqa. In Iran they call it a chador. and they're all wearing their chadors. They're being trucked in for the demonstration. One word about this. I did have an Iranian girlfriend over there. When I met her, I thought she was English because she had been to Birmingham University in England. She's fully westernized. She spoke English better than I did. But anyhow, she was Iranian, and a lot of the younger people were highly westernized and had never worn a chador. And a lot of those people since have gotten out. Anyhow, I moved from one place to another. This is the last place I stayed in, an Irish engineer. The previous place I lived with a bunch of English nurses. But, you know, it was just, I never actually rented or leased an apartment. Many other people did, especially those with families. But I just house sat. Whenever somebody went on vacation, I'd go sit with, you know, take care of his house, take care of his dog, pick up the dog stuff, and make sure everything was good. So that worked out pretty good for me. This carpet I kept, and a little bit closer to that, that's an Isfahani carpet. Cost me about $2,000. At about this time, all of the banks were closed. Everything was on strike. The banks were closed. I could not sell my cars. I knew some carpet dealers by then, and I traded my carpet, and plus gave them some more money, or I traded my car, gave them some more money, and I got this, which, by the way, I still have. The last slide of my Iran tour. The Shah was deposed on 17th of January, 1979. On the 20th of January, I and a bunch of other Bell employees, Grumman Aerospace employees, Hueys missile employees, got on an evacuation bus at the Carouge Hotel, and they drove us out to where the F-14 Tomcat base was. And there was a Pan American 707, which did a tactical approach, landed without any clearance, didn't talk to the tower or anything. We got aboard and got the hell out, okay? Altogether, there were about 8 or 9 evacuation flights.
Question.
Yes.
Chuck, do you know a mechanic named Chris Hodges?
No, I don't.
Okay, because he was over there then too.
Yeah, did he stay until the very end or what?
He
Yeah,
was on the last airplane out.
yeah.
When
Well-
was the embassy?
In Tehran, the embassy's in Tehran.
Yeah, when was that overrun?
That was, well, this is January 79. The following November is when the hostage situation occurred with the embassy. So we weren't there for that. So there were some employees with Bell who thought, oh, this is all going to blow over, you know. We're good guys. They're going to keep us. Well, they didn't. And they just left with the shirts on their backs, basically. You know, I had the opportunity to send all my stuff home, and I had my Isfahani carpet in my little bag, and I was ready to roll. Yeah, so I had everything taken care of, and most other people did too. During the mid-70s, more than 100,000 Americans worked in Iran for contracts for the Shah of Iran, okay? But by the end here, most of us had gone. It was a great place to work for the first 2.5 years. The people were good. The conditions were good. You know, we had to learn a little bit of Farsi to get along, you know, to buy stuff at the greengrocers and stuff like that. But, you know, it was worth it. Traffic was a little bit different. They have different rules over there. When I first got there, they did not have traffic lights. They did not know what a red light meant. The only people who knew what a red light meant were Westerners. And they were the only people who stopped. And usually there was a huge Mercedes truck right behind him. He was ready to roll, and he did. And the people who got in most of the accidents were Westerners. And it's a matter of faith to get through an intersection sometimes. And somehow the Iranians knew how to do it, and eventually we learned how to disregard signs and everything else. And we learned the intuitive way of getting through a cross-section where there's no stoplights or anything else. But I did have an accident once. Another rule is that on a 4-lane highway, when you want to turn left, you have to get in the far right lane first, and then you turn left through the guy in your left lane. And I was in the left lane once, and there was a Mercedes truck right there, and he turned left and crunched me against the abutment there. One last thing about traffic, then I'll go on to the next.
20 minutes.
20 minutes, okay, I can do it. Okay. You know, when you have a big traffic circle and everybody's coming in from different places and there's light, no lights, theoretically, for us, the people in the circle have the right of way over the people who are coming into this, who are trying to get in. Wrong. In Iran, it's the other way around. People coming in have right of way over people already in the traffic circle. So, go figure. That was during, they were just learning what street lights are about, and who knows what's going on now. Okay, so that is the end of my, so now we have to go to where it says Afghanistan. It would be the, probably the second to the last. But I consider Iran to be the best job I ever had. It was really interesting. From there I went to Russia, I went to China, went all over Europe. A lot of guys went all over Africa. Okay, we're starting, years later, like this represents the last job I ever had. I got hired by a company called Presidential Airways. Presidential Airways was owned by Blackwater. Okay, I am at the Blackwater training compound in Moyock, North Carolina. That's where I got hired. Blackwater paid for my car, paid for my motel, but they were in the process of being divorced, or I should say Presidential Airways was in the process of getting out of being part of Blackwater. Okay, so this is a Bell 214 ST. It's what I flew in Afghanistan. In the civilian world, it holds 18 passengers plus 2 pilots. It's the ultimate 2-bladed helicopter. Max gross weight, 17,500 pounds. It's almost twice as capable as a regular Huey. Another view. Okay. Also, Blackwater had also changed its name to Z Corporation. And since then, it's changed its name again to Academy, with an I at the end instead of a Y. That's the Blackwater logo. We were told not to take a picture of that. And you know what happens when they tell somebody not to take a picture? You got to get a better picture just to make sure you had the first one right. So the Blackwater logo is still all over the place. And it was on the map they gave us. So this is the Blackwater compound, and the strip was right. Let's see, that's the hangar that the helicopters kept in. That's a little 2,000-foot airstrip. They were going to build a bigger airstrip here, but they never did. And so this is all just kind of historical stuff. Okay, so I was trained there, hired there, trained there. It took about, not only there, but also they sent me to Houston and to a place in Florida to do one thing or another to get all the hoops jumped through. Okay, so then I went to Afghanistan. So where is Afghanistan? It's right in the, oops, get back here. It's in the middle of, it's surrounded by Iran, Pakistan, and these previous republics of Russia. So we had to have good relations with all these guys, and these guys, and these guys. Well, to heck with these guys. But anyhow, that's where Afghanistan is, and I was at a place called Shindan, which is between Herat and Farah. We're only about 60 miles from the Iranian border. So where I flew, and what I did, well, anyhow, most of our flying was just logistical support, hauling people, hauling the mail. It was not combat. But anyhow, I flew Kandahar, and there's a place up here called Chagcharan, and up here along the border with Turkmenistan and down in this area is where I did most of my flying. I never got to Kabul. When I went to and from Afghanistan, we went to Bagram, which is not indicated. Bagram was the main administrative military base. And then we get a flight from Bagram over to Shindan, or sometimes Herat, and then a helicopter ride down to Shindan. So that's kind of where it is.
What support, who are you supporting?
The U.S. military and ISAF, International Security Assistance Force, which is the international term for what we're doing there. The United States forces are 95% of the forces of the 35 or 40 nations that are there, okay? So that's who we're supporting, and mostly we supported Special Forces people rather than regular Army people.
What year?
2010. I started, it ended in 2013. I was there for 3 years. Now, the routine was you'd spend 2 months over and then 1 month at home. 2 months over, 1 month at home. And that is how it was for 3 years. So I think I had 12 trips over there. How we got over there, from Denver, United to Dulles Airport, and then a 777 from Dulles to Dubai, UAE, United Arab Emirates. Or by way of Delta, Denver to Atlanta, and then over to Dubai. Stay overnight in Dubai, and then catch a fly Dubai, Air Dubai, people who had permission to actually go over Iran, because we went right over Iran to get to, where were we going? Okay, so we're at the Dubai airport, that's the tower. A year after I got home, I heard that Dubai became the world's busiest international airport, and I believe it. Took the record away from London. That's not total flights, it's international flights. Yeah. They bought the Airbus twin-decker, I forgot now what it's, A600 or whatever it is. They bought more of those than anybody else. Yeah. Taking off of Dubai, going to Afghanistan, that's looking at the left window. And if you do a lot of Photoshop in your picture, you can cut through the haze and you see the Burj Dubai, the world's tallest building. And I think it is still the world's tallest building. I don't know
Is that dust blowing around the air?
What?
Is that dust blowing?
Yes. And that's normally what it looks like. You normally, I mean, there's a lot of dust, haze, smog, it's sea level basically. And I had to do something to be able to cut through the dust with Photoshop to get that. That's out the left window. Out the right window, on a different trip, view of the airport, climbing up, going out over the Persian Gulf. And they've built a lot of resorts out here. They're in the process of building resorts out here. Some more of the infrastructure, more results, or more resort stuff. Goodbye, Dubai. Goodbye, Dubai. Okay, we fly down the Horn to get, let's see, does it show here? Oh, well, never mind. I thought I had another map. We go down to where we cross the Hormuz Strait. You've probably all heard of that. So we were looking down, waiting for something to blow up down there. It never did. But anyhow, we go across the shortest passage between Dubai and Iran. We get over Bandar Abbas, Iran, where they have an Air Force base, but we don't land there at all. So Dubai is a UAE operated airline, so they have permission to go over there. So crossing Iran, we see some mountains. No, this is what I was looking for. So basically from Dubai, we'd fly down here to the end, cross over like that, over Bandar Abbas, up to the tri-border area of Iran, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. up past Kandahar and up the road. It's not quite on here, but Kabul is up here. We don't land at Kabul. We go a little further up to Bagram Air Base. Okay, we're getting into country here. We're in the vicinity of Bagram Air Force Base. In fact, that's it right there. A little close up. That's the main U.S. base, not the biggest base, but the important base. It's where the military headquarters are. So we're going to land at Bagram. And here they have F-16s, F-15s, they have all the stuff. And when I first got there, I think I stayed there about a week before they could get a flight for me over to Shindan. And every night, jets were taking off when I was trying to get some sleep. And the place was really busy. This is during the build-up in 2010.
Is that base still operational?
I believe so. I think this and just a few others are operational. Most of it's closed down because at the height, well, when I was there, I think there were over 100,000 people there, military. And by the time I left, it was down to about 15,000. So a lot of places closed, and are still closed. And what's going on there now, I have no idea. Okay, taxiing into Bagram. At this point, they told us, everybody shut off your cameras or we will hang you by your thumbs or something. Okay, after staying at Bagram, I got a Presidential Airways owns a bunch of de Havilland Dash 8s, which are twin-engine high-wing planes. And so okay, we're going over towards Shindan, crossing over a lot of the Hindu Kush Mountains. And you're wondering, what am I doing here? So this is Shindan, where I spent 3 years on final approach to runway 36. When I first got there, none of this existed. Everybody was on the west side. And then eventually, we all moved to the east side, and then we built an Air Force base, which is, we built at a Afghan Air Force base, which is that up there. That's the ramp. So anyhow, continuing on. My first tent in the west side, we eventually moved to the east side and had newer tents. This is the original Russian-built control tower. Shindan was the largest air base in Afghanistan when the Russians were in Afghanistan, okay? But that's one of the very few remaining examples of Russian architecture. Anyhow, it served as it now served as the headquarters building for the ISAF troops or the U.S. troops here. Presidential operations. This is our first operations building here for us. And by then, well, we're still calling ourselves Presidential Airways. Eventually, we became part of AAR Airlift, which bought Presidential from Blackwater. Okay, so we have our Bell 214 STs in revetments here. They're all painted blue. They're on skids rather than the wheels, the wheeled version, which I flew in North Carolina. You can easily put wheels on this. They're easily transferred one way or another. This is still on the west side. We're here. This is a bomb crater, courtesy of the U.S. Air Force, when, I guess in the very early 1990s, they took out the Taliban.
Chuck, 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Gosh. This is not, okay. Okay, so that's what I flew, Bell 214 ST. Usually with passengers, often we carried a lot of mail, and we'd pack it full of mail. Okay, now we're on the other side. We're on the east side, and we've moved to better quarters. So we had 4 of these, but only 3 of them flew. One of them was an unofficial parts bin, which is illegal, but that's how it worked. Okay, so we had, in grand total, we had 4 of these operational in the country. We also had S-61s. They had about 20 of these. So most of the Presidential Airways pilots and aircraft were this deal. And there was another one. We got some newer ones. We also had some fixed wing. There's a Casa 235, and we called it Grizzly. And riding in the thing was a grizzly deal, I'll tell you that. We had the Dash 8s, which I normally flew from Bagram to here, or flew in from the Bagram to here. And we had a Casa 212, and I don't know if you can read the registration on this. I can't. Well, if you look at the slide, oh, there it is.
6-8.
BW is the last, so this still has a Blackwater registration on it. But eventually they were all switched over to something non-Blackwater. But they had a bunch of these aircraft as well. So they were the largest Part 135 operation, civilian operation in Afghanistan. Part 135 refers to the FAA designation of what kind of operation it is. So we operated under US FAA rules, theoretically. Well, we did. Yeah, we did. I won't say we didn't. It was really hard to find Vietnam veterans there. And I only met 4 others who were pilots in Vietnam. And all these guys represent pilots who 45 years before this picture were flying combat missions in Vietnam. So I thought that was worth a picture. Here we're known as AAR Airlift. Officially, this is our operations building on the other side of the runway. So, there was one other, and he wasn't available for the picture, but most of the people in charge over here were not even born when we were flying combat missions in Vietnam. The guy I worked for, a retired lieutenant colonel, who was then a civilian, he wasn't even born when I first went to Vietnam. So I think I was the oldest helicopter pilot some of these people had ever seen. I think that's my last picture of Afghanistan. So if you stay for the movies, you get more.
If you want to stick around afterwards, our next presentation, Chuck has quite some interesting videos of his flying Cobras and other things too. So please. Well, let's take about a 3-minute break or so. If you need to hit a restroom, it's right down the corridor. And please come back, and I'd like to invite Melody and Mariana to come on up.
You want
And
this?
yeah, let me have that.
Start over there.
Yeah.